Hello everyone, this is Fantasy-esque, and welcome to a brand new series on the channel, the Fairy Amazon Legacy Challenge in The Sims 4. We just got fairies, and we're all excited to see what they're about. But if you know me, you know I love story, so I had to get my fantasy hat on and dive into a new world of supernaturals. For those of you who are new, the goal of the Fairy Amazon Legacy Challenge is to create a fairy queen and her all-female court and continue their bloodlines for as many generations as possible. Daughters are desired, and sons not so much. Not only that, but the fairies have to couple with a different male for every pregnancy. Sounds exciting? Well, if you like fantasy, supernaturals, and occults, you're gonna love this. Of course, no fairy court is complete without a residence, and our queen and her ladies have the fairy royal grounds. This will be the setting of our story and the political battleground for our fairies as they navigate the highs and lows of fairy life. But we'll get into more of this place and more of these politics later on. For now, we need to set the scene and establish how the court and our queen came to be. The Fey Forest is fading. Humans are cutting down trees for their settlements and inching ever closer to the heart of the forest, where Fey magic resides. And the fairies themselves are defenseless, after generations of petty infighting and scattered ideologies. In an effort to save the Fey Forest, the nature spirits that guard it have chosen a young fairy and crowned her as the Queen of the Fey. It is their hope that she will bring order to the fairies and keep Fey magic alive to protect the Fey Forest and its supernatural residents. To keep Fey magic alive, they must continue their bloodlines, because magic is in the blood. But unlike the perfect and immortal vampires that live in the neighboring queendom of Cloudy Willow, the fairies are delicate and prone to genetic sickness. Each generation gets weaker than the one before it, and ever closer to dying out. And so the nature spirits steal human children and transform them into fairies to create new, healthy bloodlines. But it all comes down to this. Can the new queen of the Fae unite the fairies under her banner and succeed as the first ruler of the Fey Forest? Now let's jump into cast and take a look at our cast of characters. First up, we have our fairy monarch, Queen Justin Crocusfade. She aspires to be a Renaissance sim and has the traits neat, socially awkward, and family-oriented. Justin was a jeweler in the Fey Forest who used to spend her days keeping her workshop well-organized and avoiding others while she created memorable and timeless jewelry for her clients. She tried to keep interactions to a minimum because she always messed up what she was saying, but thankfully, her work spoke for itself. She even went on to design the royal jewelry she's wearing as queen. It's hard for her to admit, but a part of her has always wanted to be surrounded by family. For as long as she's known, she's been alone in the world, but her nature spirit, Crocusfade, has always been there to guide her. Fitness is not really her strong suit, and she doesn't like egotistical sims either. Something about them assuming they're better than her just because she's quiet always rubs her the wrong way. And honestly, she doesn't know how she feels about being queen of the Fae. She feels a little out of her depth and believes that the nature spirits have way more faith in her abilities than they should. In terms of genetics, she has cream wings, warm 12 skin, brown 3 hair, and black eyes. If you guys have been watching my Vampire Amazon series, you'll notice that the fairy eyes I use here are different. These ones are actually darker than the vampire eyes without the holographic glow. She also has this beautiful golden circlet that marked her as queen. Her firstborn daughter, the crown princess, will also have a golden circlet but with different colored stones, and the rest of her daughters will have the silver version of what she's wearing right now. And yes, I realize that she is quite similar to Queen Darling, but it was purely coincidental. I only realized afterwards that she looked so much like our vampiric queen, but I was way too attached not to keep her. Lady Supriya Ray Daisy is our first noble lady. She aspires to be a friend of the animals and has the traits genius, active, and jealous. She was an innkeeper in the Fey Forest with business acumen and the drive to make things happen. So obviously, when she saw all the little critters in her corner of the forest, she thought a cute critter inn would be the perfect stop for fairies to grab a drink and bite. And it was a success. But when the Queen of the Fae chose her to be among the original court, she could not say no. Now, she doesn't like to admit it, but she has a jealous streak, which makes her possessive of friends and lovers alike. But she hopes she can keep it under control. Fingers crossed there'll be no problems in court. In terms of genetics, she has white wings, neutral 16 skin, black 2 hair, and blue eyes. Lady Katarina Night Ember is our second noble lady. She aspires to be a friend of the animals and has the traits bookworm, foodie, and hot-headed. Katarina was one of the few fairies who chose to work in the human village as a butcher. She was curious about human food and wanted to know more about the people infringing on fairy land. But eventually, their wastefulness and disregard for the abundance around them made her so angry she had to leave. Thankfully, her passion was recognized by the Queen of the Fae, and she was recruited into the main court. She hopes she'll meet some spirited Sims among the fairies to share her fiery enthusiasm with. But she also knows she needs to keep an eye on her temper, because not everyone she meets will be on her wavelength. In terms of genetics, she has black wings, warm 3 skin, red 8 hair, red eyes, and freckles. Lady Brant Falcon Russell is our third noble lady. She aspires to be a curator and has the traits love the outdoors, art lover, and good. Brant has always been a painter at heart, wanting to immerse herself in the natural world around her and capture it in a magical way on canvas. She often spent her days wandering the Fey Forest and painting the ordinary sights she came across. Though she had limited contact with others, she was always kind to the people she met and was treated kindly in return. When the Queen of the Fae summoned her to join the main court, it was as unbelievable as it was exciting. There was a gallery at the royal grounds, and she would be tasked with capturing life in the court. Funnily enough, Brant has never really liked optimistic Sims. Something about their tendency to gloss over the realities of fairy life grates on her nerves. After all, fairies are dying, and new bloodlines are created by capturing human children. In terms of genetics, she has brown wings, neutral 16 skin, black 2 hair, and purple eyes. Lady Bren Fronstar is our fourth noble lady. She aspires to be a painter extraordinaire and has the traits goofball, romantic, and family-oriented. Bren was a builder in the Fey Forest and the lead architect for the Fairy Royal Grounds. She was known for being full of life and brimming with ideas of how to connect spaces to bring people together. Whether it's lovers or the prospect of family, she's always been open-hearted, and there was no question about what she wanted to do when the Queen of the Fae summoned her to join the main court. Part of her motivation is seeing how the fairies live in the spaces she created and capturing extraordinary visions of the royal grounds for future generations. In terms of genetics, she has black wings, warm 12 skin, brown 5 hair, and blue-green eyes. Lady Kayla Bumblepaw is our fifth noble lady. She aspires to be a bodybuilder and has the traits active, loves the outdoors, and foodie. Kayla was a healer in the Fey Forest, with a mild obsession with becoming stronger and crafting stronger cures for the fairies and their ailments. But eventually, she found her fondness for children and their softness too, becoming equally interested in food and providing for them. When the Queen of the Fae invited her to be a caretaker in the female faculty, she felt there was no one better for the role. She's fit enough to keep up with youngsters, so energy won't be a problem, but she does have a dislike for argumentative Sims, which might be a challenge when it comes to children and their tantrums, although she still has faith in her abilities. In terms of genetics, she has orange wings, warm 14 skin, brown 5 hair, and green eyes. Now I'll go over the Fairy Amazon rule set I've set up in a Google document. If you guys are already familiar with the vampire version, you can skip this section because it's pretty much the same. But I do have some changes for fairies. I'll link the document in the description below so you can skim through it and see the updates I've made for fairies highlighted in pink. This section of the video is mainly for anyone new or anyone wanting to remind themselves of how we play. Now I've already gone over the premise at the beginning of the video, so I'm just going to skip ahead to roles. The fairy court is made up of a queen, her counselors, noble ladies, princesses, and young dames. Political relationships are very important because they have a huge impact on whether a fairy lasts in court or even survives it. The queen. This is the monarch of the queendom and the fairy who has the most influence in decision making, usually. She is the head of the household and the bearer of the crown. Counselors. The main court has 2 counselors at all times to advise the queen in matters of state. They change every season depending on who has the highest relationship with the queen, and are chosen from among the queen's noble ladies. Noble ladies. Fairies above young adulthood and not of royal blood fall into this category. They serve the queen and counselors in court while trying to expand and maintain their own bloodlines. Princesses. These are the female offspring of the monarch and the only ones capable of inheriting the crown. They begin participating in court life as teens and can be voted in as counselors once they become young adults. They can serve in the main court under their mother's reign, however they cannot take part in breeding. Dames. These are the female offspring of the noble ladies. They begin participating in court life as teens and become an official noble lady once they're young adults. They can begin serving in court alongside their mothers as a noble lady, as well as participate in breeding. Princes. These are the sons of queens, considered to be good breeding stock. If they father a baby girl, she is born with +2 influence due to having royal paternal lineage. Lords. These are the sons of noble ladies, considered to be good breeding stock. If they father a baby girl, she is born with +1 influence due to having noble paternal lineage. Court life. Life in the main court is all about making good relationships and gaining influence. Influence points give weight to voting power when it comes to matters of life and death. Influence points start off at 0 and are distributed in the following way. Family influence plus faction influence plus bonus points. Faction influence is unique to fairy politics and is determined by a fairy's alignment towards the harmonious and discordant factions. A fairy with an undecided faction starts off with +1 faction influence. Since they don't belong to any side, they have a little sway with all sides. Once a fairy chooses to join a faction, they get +1 faction influence for every member of the main court that is also in their faction. Influence accumulates over a lifetime and is gained or lost from major events. Bonus points are allocated according to a fairy's role. Influence can be gained in the following events: +1 influence for every baby girl born. Winning a tournament gives you +1 influence. Marriage to a royal male gives you +2 influence. Marriage to a noble male gives you +1 influence. In the event of multiple babies, where the gender is mixed, only influence gained from any girls will be counted. Influence can be lost in the following events: -1 influence for the birth of every baby boy, -1 influence for exile, -2 influence for divorce from a royal male, and -1 influence for divorce from a noble male. Females are born with family influence from the number of royal and noble males in her bloodline. For every royal male in her direct bloodline, both paternal and maternal, newborn females gain +2 family influence. For every noble male in her direct bloodline, both paternal and maternal, newborn females gain +1 family influence. Reckoning, death, and exile. Within the main court, having enemies is dangerous. Fairies can call a reckoning on their enemies and have them killed or exiled from the queendom. Only the queen and counselors have this right, and can call a reckoning on a noble lady, princess, or dame that is their enemy. During a reckoning, every member of the court must cast their vote for either death or exile. This is determined by whether they have a red or green relationship bar with the fairy being condemned. A red bar or negative relationship means a death vote, and a green bar or positive relationship means an exile vote. No relationship means the court member abstains from voting. This is where influence comes into play. Each court member's vote is counted according to their influence points. The more influence a fairy has, the more their vote weighs. The fairy being condemned can use their influence to make an argument for exile. Their influence will be counted among the exile votes. Once all the votes are tallied up, the reckoning will either decide on a death or an exile. If the voting results in a tie, the reckoning will be postponed till the next season, 4 weeks later. This is in hopes that loyalties or influence across the court will change enough to make a deciding vote. If a fairy is exiled, they cannot return to the queendom under the same monarch that exiled them. However, they may be called back to court under a future queen. If you are playing with 2 Amazon courts like I am, and jumping between them for each generation, exiled court members can live their period of exile in foreign courts. In the case of my game, since I will be swapping between vampire and fairy Amazon, fairies who are exiled will live as guests in the vampire courts, and any vampire exiled from their queendom will live as guests in the fairy court. Breeding. Pregnancies are big events in the main court and regulated heavily by the queen. Each male can only be used for 1 conception for genetic variability. Pregnancies occur within the breeding season, which begins with the birth of the queen's first child and ends with the birth of the 5th baby girl. Breedings occur one at a time from oldest to youngest mature fairy, so young adults or adults, with the queen beginning and being every pregnancy in between. As an example, the order would work in the following way: Queen, Noble Lady 1, Queen, Noble Lady 2, Queen, Noble Lady 3, Queen, Noble Lady 4. The breeding cycle repeats once you reach the end until the 5th baby girl is born. Dames who age up into noble ladies can be added to the breeding order. Princesses cannot participate in breeding to prevent future contenders for the throne. The fairy court is a fluid court, which means that ladies who have not had any children continue to serve under the new queen. When a queen steps down from the throne, all ladies who have had children under her reign exit the court with her. Pregnancies are not without its dangers. With every pregnancy, there is a chance of dying from childbirth, which starts off at 1% and increases by 1% for every pregnancy. So a fairy on her 5th pregnancy will have a 5% chance of dying from childbirth. Fairies are also delicate creatures, and their health can be fragile. Births can be more difficult depending on how many ailments a fairy has had in their life. For every ailment they've had, fairies have a plus 1% chance of dying from childbirth, even if they have healed themselves from that ailment. So if a fairy is on her 5th pregnancy and she's had 2 ailments in her life up until then, she'll have a 7% chance of dying from childbirth, 5 plus 2. But that's not all. Ailments impact offspring. Fairy children inherit genetic sickness from their parents. So if a fairy father and a fairy mother have had 2 ailments each by the time their child is born, their offspring will have a genetic sickness of 4%. Genetic sickness is added to the percentage chance of dying from childbirth, so it will affect females once they start having their own children. And genetic sickness passes from one generation to the next, so if a bloodline isn't careful, they will become weaker over time and have a higher chance of dying during births. Married males have sole breeding rights with their wives, so the breeding order functions as normal, but instead of changing males for every breeding, the females stick with their husbands. Succession. Succession occurs when all 5 girls born within the breeding season become young adults. In the case of dead or exiled children, it occurs when the surviving girls become young adults. Succession within the royal family is determined by age. The eldest living daughter of the reigning queen is the crown princess and heir to the throne. The takeover is not violent and is handled peacefully. When a new queen takes the throne, the old monarch becomes the queen mother and exits the court with her bred ladies. They are given a place in the castle to live, if you have the For Rent expansion pack, or another lot in the queendom. A queen's sisters cannot serve in the main court under her reign. They retain their title of princess, but join the luxury class of royal family members who live in the castle or in other lots, benefiting from their status but not participating in court life. In a way, they are the backups should something happen to the queen and her bloodline. If a queen dies while the breeding season is still ongoing but has an underage heir, the oldest member of the luxury class may become regent until succession occurs. However, to protect the royal line, the regent will not be allowed to participate in any breeding. If there is no one in the luxury class, the eldest noble member of court will become regent instead. Succession within the noble court is also determined by age. A new queen takes the 4 eldest members of unbred nobility into her new court. Any remaining nobles join the aristocratic class, to be pulled from in the future from oldest to youngest. If there aren't enough nobles to make the 4, and there aren't any members of the aristocratic class, new blood can be introduced. Marriages. Marriages between court-born male and female fairies are celebrated and monogamous. Fairies cannot choose who they marry, but they can choose to divorce their spouse if they so wish. The whole point of marriages is to connect bloodlines and to ensure security for the offspring born within the union. This is achieved through guaranteed family influence for every child born within the marriage. A fairy takes their last name from their birth mother, and this does not change with marriage. All parties keep their birth names, as bloodlines are traced through female lines and connected to the nature spirit each family honors. This is also important to keep track of any royal and noble males in a female's lineage, because this impacts the influence they're born with. Religion. Fairies do not worship but honor nature spirits, which take the form of she-cats and watch over the families they are connected to. As respect to their nature spirit, they take the she-cat's name as their last name. These nature spirits see the world as a garden and are responsible for growing and nurturing fairy bloodlines within it. If they feel that a bloodline is ruining the garden, they may weed it entirely. So fairies must heed their conduct and keep their choices in mind. I use my Clandrin cats for this. If you're unfamiliar with the game, it is completely free to download and play. You can use it to create the cats needed for your nature spirits. Here's where to download the game. I have a link in the document. Within my own game, I like the idea that the fairies and the vampires share the same religious myths, but they disagree on what the cats actually are. The fairies believe they're nature spirits, and the vampires believe they're bloodline deities. And that's all we have for the rules. Next up, we have a tour of the fairy royal grounds. Much of fairy life is based outdoors, exposed to the elements, so you'll see a lot of things that are typically indoors in the vampire court. And now that I'm looking, I kind of feel like the fairy courts will be death traps for any exiled vampires that end up in this queendom. So they'll survive death in their queendom and then die in ours. First up, we have the archery yard. This will not only be a pastime for the fairies, but will also be used for archery competitions. And yes, I have tried and failed to implement this with the vampires, but I'll be doing it differently with the fairies, and I'll talk more about it later on when we take a look at our tournaments in the calendar. This is the Outer Commons, where we have our dance floor, mixology bar, places to sit, chat, and lounge, as well as play on the swings. It's basically the social hub of our court and where we will be hosting any parties and events. This is the place of reckoning, where the court members will decide on whether they vote for the death or exile of a condemned fairy. So unless there's something really serious going on in the court, this space will probably remain unused. Behind the place of reckoning, we have this building, which forms the Queen's private chamber. You might think the positioning is a little ominous, but our Queen clearly doesn't think much of it. Let's go ahead and take a look inside. Welcome to the Queen's chamber. As you can see, we've gone with a lot of grey, white, and green. It's the fairy theme. You'll see it's sectioned off into a few different corners, so we're going to move around a little. Now, aside from being the Queen's private space, I imagine she will host the ladies here quite often. which is why we have a cozy corner to sit by the fireplace or by the window and a few different drink amenities. Maybe the Queen will call her ladies to have private conversations with her from time to time, or someone might choose to seek her out here. And of course, we can't forget somewhere for the Queen to deal with her personal hygiene. She'll have to clear the room first so she doesn't have an audience, but it's reasonably spacious and it's cozy. A little bit further into the Queen's inner sanctum is a chess table, a lounge, her magnificently fey bed, a standing mirror, and a dresser. At first I thought this was gonna be where all the royal children will be conceived, and then I found out about a fairy woohoo in the sky. This is our throne room, and yes, it is completely outdoors. It's pretty much in the center of the grounds, which makes sense because it is the heart of the fairy court. We'll probably see the fairies here a lot for many important events, and I for one am quite excited about it. This is where we have our mystical pool. As the fairies are fueled by fey magic, it's inevitable that certain things around them are not quite normal. These magic-filled waters are emerald green, instead of any shade of blue you might expect. Across from the pool is our tournament arena. This is where we'll have our sword fighting tournaments, along with judging for a few other events unique to the fairy calendar. This area will be a hub of activity once every season, but will probably go unused at other times, unless someone decides to sword fight in the middle of it. This little building is our birth chamber. Since fairy births are a delicate and dangerous affair, they have a little more privacy during this time. Let's take a look inside and see what sort of arrangement we have going on. Inside the birth chamber, there is a place to drink, lounge, and play the organ, then a partition that divides the guests from the actual birth itself. To be inside the partition with the Queen means that you are the most trusted member of her court. This is the Fairy Clinic, in close proximity to the birth chamber and the tournament arena. As you know, ailments are going to be a problem that fairies face, and so all fairies carry the expectation of learning medicine. I'm thinking when a fairy gets an ailment, the closest member to them in court at the time is the one who will take the responsibility of curing them. Now we get to the largest building in the fairy royal grounds, the Inner Commons. This is where I imagine a lot of the youngsters will gravitate towards, or the court in general during bad weather, and maybe for some dire circumstances too. There's a lovely place to sit on the front patio, and there's actually no front door, because I imagine the fairies like the feeling of flowing in and out of the main building like a breeze. I think it adds to the sense of openness and freedom too. Inside we have a small kitchen and bathrooms for the court ladies to use. Since the older fairies themselves don't need food, this space will mainly be used as a means to provide for the children till they come of age and can manifest their own fairy powers. On the other side of the staircase, we have a cards table, cozy fireplace, standing mirror, and study desk tucked into a corner. There is also a door that leads to the back patio where the fun continues. This is the outdoor patio of the Inner Commons. Here we have a few more games for the fairies with darts, a foosball table, and even a bubble blower for them to unwind with. I'm so curious to see where the fairies will spend the most time, but this feels like a decent contender. This is the upper floor of the Inner Commons, and where we have our gallery. I did mention earlier on that we will have some fairies painting, and this is where those paintings will be displayed. I typically don't have specific events in mind and wait till my Sims have the want to paint. Then I'll find something that's happening in the court at that time for them to paint. When we eventually move to the next generation, we'll make copies of these paintings to use as decorations for the next fairy royal grounds. There's a little balcony at the front with a chess table for any fairies wanting a private game or moment to think. I kinda like this being away from everyone else. You get to have moments like this with the quiet and the moonlight. Here we have a darker part of the Inner Commons. This is the execution circle, where fairies condemned to death during a reckoning will meet their end. There's a small area for the court fairies to witness the execution as it takes place. Now we're heading underground, where the fairies have more sensitive and protected places. Let's take a little walk along the hall and see what sights we might find. I feel like if we had an exiled vampire in the court, they would probably spend their time in the inner commons or underground, unless they wanted to die. I'm not gonna lie, this looks kinda scary to me, like an infinitely looping hallway that never ends, but I imagine the fairies feel right at home. Their underground emulates the gardens they have above, and I'm sure it keeps them at peace. This is the fairy undergarden, where our court members will sleep and rest up. Instead of individual bedrooms, they have these little fairy houses they can use as they see fit. They'll also be protected here and away from any harsh elements. This is where we have the Noble Fairy Crypt. All the noble members of court who die within this generation will be laid to rest here. It's a quaint spot that might see some adjustment in the future, but for now, this is what we have. Next in the hallway, we have our Royal Fairy Crypt. This is where the Queen and her children will be laid to rest should they die within this generation. I kinda like the idea that the royals get a more mossy gravebed, dotted with little flowers compared to the nobles, and of course they'll have additional decorations around a grave as well. This is the wellness room. Fairies can come here to relax and balance themselves with some yoga, meditation, and massages. I do have some chairs tucked away in the side, which you can't see here, but they are present. This is our green room, where the fairies will grow whatever plants they desire. Gardening is not something I'm typically very mindful of, but we'll see how the fairies go. I do realize it is a big part of their life state. One great thing I've noticed is that Sims who live on the same lot but not in the same household will plant things of their own volition, so I'm kind of hoping for that. At the end of the hallway, we have two closed rooms. The first one, which we see here, is going to be our female faculty. This is where our caretaker will live with the children until they become teens and are sent to live in the main court. I don't like the raising aspect of kids at all, so I'm gonna make this a separate household in the Fairy Royal Grounds, which I can do because I have the For Rent expansion pack. So yes, I will have to turn this whole lot into a rental lot. The second room we have at the end of the hallway is this one, the male faculty. This is where all the male breeders and sons of the court will live. I forgot to mention this beforehand, but if the spaces look too small for you, don't worry. These rooms are just where the different faculties will sleep. The rest of the royal grounds will be a shared space for them to use with members of our court. Okay, the tour is finally complete. I feel like that took 5 years. Now there's only one thing left to do before we're ready to end the video. Taking a look at the fairy calendar. Aside from birthdays and due dates, which I mark on the calendar as they come, there will be two types of events here for us to keep an eye on. The first one is the day of the new council, which happens at the beginning of every season. This is when the Queen will reappoint her councillors for the new season. The second type of event will be our tournaments. Some of them might be familiar from the vampire series, but others are unique to fairies, and they all occur on the second week of every season. In the spring, we'll have our sword fighting tournament, and in the summer, we'll have our archery contest. Now, with the vampires, I try to do the archery on a one-on-one basis, like I do with the sword fighting, but that was boring and didn't work. But there is an option to host an event called an archery competition where the contestants will head to the archery yard on their own and declare a victor. I'll try that and see how it goes. In the autumn, we have the Royal Forage Quest, where every fairy will be given one chance to forage something and present it to the court. The fairy with the highest quality item will win the tournament. And in the winter, we'll have the Royal Cure event. Every fairy will be given one chance to create the best cure they can and present it to the court. The fairy with the highest quality cure will be declared victor. Now, I'm not sure if I'll determine this according to the level of the cure they make or the price. I'll have to see whether the price fluctuates like paintings do. And that's all for the fairy calendar. I haven't had a video take this much time to make in a long time, and I'm really exhausted. But I hope you guys enjoyed it and are excited for the new series. Let me know what you think and if you have anything in particular you're looking forward to. And of course, do you have a favorite fairy in the court? I'm gonna wrap up here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.